So for request Rashmika to just do some a quick introduction, self-introduction outside of what I've spoken already.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Arun. I hope I'm audible. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon for people who are in India, and I'm looking forward to today's session. I am Rashmika. I lead the revenue marketing function at Street Den Chennai. Like Arun said, we've been practicing account-based marketing strategy at MSD for almost 2.5, 3 years now. We've kind of implemented it and scaled it for 2 of our brands internally. So we'll be discussing what worked for us, what did not, what were the learnings that you guys can pick up and make use of it for your own organizations in the discussion.
Yeah, so thanks for the intro, Rashmika. I think let's just start with the questions, right? 3 years ago, when ABM was not a buzzword, it was an alien concept, right? I wanted to ask, like, what triggered and who triggered this process that you need to start thinking about ABM, and how did this all start?
So yeah, like you said, in 2019, ABM was not really a very fancy or a very popular strategy as such. So a couple of things internally, a couple of challenges that we faced internally kind of made us do research about what more can we do better, especially Street Den being a company which targets enterprise and mid-market accounts. We realized that, we will something that works for smaller organizations that target smaller companies may not and was not really working for us, right? So one important stage where we were really held up or stuck was where we kind of scaled our campaigns both inbound and outbound, but our top of the funnel kept growing, whereas our bottom of the funnel, where which means closures and opportunities or leads, did not really move down the funnel, right? This was a clear problem because we were putting in a lot of dollars. We had a lot of people working for us in different teams to bring in more leads. So then we realized that something was really going wrong in terms of our strategy, and maybe we had to look at additional strategies or additional new ways of creative ways of bringing in leads. And that's when we got to know about account-based marketing as a strategy, right? Because we realized that most of the leads that we brought in through our different campaigns were not an ideal fit for the company, and that is one of the major reasons that they did not move down the funnel. This is back when we were tracking a lot of, our major KPI was NQLs and form fills, and not pipeline or revenue for the marketing and the outbound team.
Okay, excellent. So just a follow-up question on that, right? So this was initiated by the marketing team, is it? And how did you go and present to your leaders and executives, and how did you secure the buy-in, right? So any new initiatives, right? It's sort of like, I mean, there's all kinds of lenses to sort of see whether this is something that is going to work or not. So how did you convince your management, right? And this is also a recurring question that we keep getting, right? So how do you approach, right? So as a marketing team, you might be convinced, or maybe you've also got in the sales team, but like, how do you actually secure the budget, sponsorship, and things like that?
So, like you said, I think the most important part about starting ABM in any organization is to get your executives buy-in, right? Because this is not going to be a marketeer's job alone. You are going to be including, or multiple teams are going to be playing a vital role to make ABM a success in your company, right? So when we kind of pitched this to our CXOs or senior folks in our company, one thing that we really kind of mentioned was we really needed a different strategy to scale our revenues, right? When you go from 0 to 1, there are a lot of things that works, but from 1 to 10 and upwards, you really need something different, right? And especially for companies that's looking at enterprise closures, enterprise deals, this was something that really was important. And number two, when we spoke about ROI, something that I really mentioned that really helped me convince the team was we already had everybody on board, right? We had an outbound team, we had the sales team, we had the marketing team, and we had our limited marketing budgets, right? So we, in fact, kind of pitched it this way that our ROIs for these campaigns are going to be a lot more better, since the investment is not going to be pretty huge like what they assumed, because most of it is something that we were already doing. And in terms of people, we already had at least the initial set of team members. We just had to bring people from different siloed teams together to kind of work this out.
Okay,
These were
excellent.
the two ways that we did it. In fact, we had people from the product team, customer success team also to come together, to be a part of this pod to help us understand how to progress this forward.
Okay, interesting. I think including somebody from customer success is not something that everybody sort of does it, right? So I think we talk about alignment, and then I have some questions
Yes.
around that, right? But we'll come to that. So you touched upon the team aspect, right? So you were basically trying to repurpose and then remodel the composition of the team in a way that it works for the ABM process, right? So how did you approach, right? So what kind of changes that you had to do to build that core team?
Right. So, like I said, our marketing team was pretty big when we started. Like we had digital marketing, product marketing, customer content, and all of that, right? But the only issue was teams were siloed; they did not work together. We had different, like outbound team had their own target, the inbound team had their own targets, right? So when we put the core team together, we knew that we were doing something different. So we wanted to kind of make sure we make use of everybody's expertise here. So the core team, or like we used to call it the ABM pod. We had we have multiple products. So initially, when we started for a match read, we started ABM for Vue. To give you just an example of how we kind of implemented this, we created sub pods focusing a particular geo slash product, so that we brought in geography, the geo based salesperson, and then we also brought in the product specialist for that particular product, right? And then we had, of course, the marketing team. We had somebody from the digital marketing front, and then we of course had content and product marketer who can help us with content wherever needed. And then we also had the BDR and research team. This was the core team for ABM. Team as in we had, though we had multiple pods, we of course did not have the luxury to have different people on different pods. We of course had people who were like, for example, I was the only one who was who's representing digital marketing in multiple pods. You can definitely have one person do multiple things, but having stakeholders from each and every team is pretty important to kind of ensure that things are put together the right way.
Okay. Excellent. So I think the pod concept again is it's pretty new, and when you chose these individuals, right, from the different functions, so what were the skill sets, for example, you were looking like who did you end up identifying, and what were the attributes that you were looking for in terms of skills and everything else?
Right. So in terms of marketing, digital marketing, it was pretty straightforward, right? We were looking at someone who had hands-on experience with performance marketing, since it was more, it was more to do with ads and campaigns, and of course, analytics comes without saying, right? In terms of outbound, we looked at a senior member in the outbound team because we were looking at bringing in CXOs and enterprise leads. So we wanted to make use of someone who had a lot of experience in the outbound in doing outbound outreach. Research was fairly a new function. I'll definitely need to talk about what we did in research that did not work and that really kind of what we learned out of it. But research was something that we had to hire. So we had one person, one intern who helped us out with, because we really did not know what we had to do with research. And then we had sales people aligned to whatever geography we had, right? Like whether if it's US, we had the US salesperson, and then we had different geography. Different people representing their own geographies. One important aspect here is when we had our product experts, right? Like people who were in the organization for a long time, who were talking to the customers, basically product people on my team, on my company, in our company, talking to the customers and doing the solution engineering pitches to them, right? They exactly knew what were the pain points, what kind of people they were talking to. Salespeople were able to really help us understand what are the personas we have to be kind of implementing or using for our campaign. So these are the kind of people we had on our team.
Okay. So, like you touched upon research, and I think this is a core part of your ABM planning and execution and everything, right? I think it's just the first step that you have to do. So you can talk about the aspect of what went in, right, and how did you approach, right? So, for example, what kind of accounts did you end up choosing in? And you also talked about the identifying somebody to exclusively to do the research, right? What was that person's mandate, right? What kind of signals or anything like that or insights were they looking for, and how do they approach it?
So initially, like I said, before I talk about research, I'd really like to say that one thing that you really need to kind of ensure you set up before starting your ABM strategy is to have very definite KPIs and KRAs for every individual on the team, because since it's a very new strategy and very new experiment that we tend to do, right? Like a lot of times we don't know who owns what in the process. So that's something that we of course set up, but then we did not, we later realized what has to be changed. So that's something that is very important when you start ABM as a strategy at your organization. Second thing is in terms of KPIs. Initially, in most of our, most of the marketeers or outbound people will agree that we were, or we even now a lot of companies are tracking MQLs and SQLs as their KPI, but we had to move out of it and start tracking uh, the demos that we were booking and the opportunities and the pipeline value against every opportunity. Since all these leads were enterprise and larger accounts, this is something, this is a basic thing that we had to change in terms of KPIs that we were tracking. And one important thing that we set up, when we set up, we initially missed and then later figured out was, to track the progress of these leads at every stage possible so that there are no lead leakages, right? So this is in terms of the setup or prep that we really need to do before getting started with ABM, right? So to start ABM in terms of the strategy or the campaign itself, the first step is to identify the list of accounts. So how different ABM is from your spray and pray campaigns is that you identify a list of accounts that you want to kind of onboard as your customer, right? So in terms of list identification, initially what we did is we of course had our CEOs and CXOs help us with a little bit of competitors and existing customers and their competitors. We kind of built a basic or the base list based on our existing customers. We went back and saw what are the other competitors for our customers in that particular geography and in that particular segment, for example, fashion and non-fashion, right? But one mistake or one thing where we really struggled was to build email IDs or kind of extrapolate this list. For example, we built maybe, say a 20 accounts or 30 accounts on the list. We wanted a larger list, of a list which had 100 companies or 200 companies, right? And since we didn't have a resource already on our team and none of us have already did this in the past, we had to outsource this to an agency to kind of get the list, right? While it definitely worked for us in that time because we didn't have a resource for us to build it in house, the issues we faced was we of course didn't know how to kind of update the list, how to go about verifying these lists, right? So we later figured out that since outbound people partially go about building their own email IDs when they do outreach, we kind of figured out we'll take one person from the outbound and make them kind of own research for us, and that's something that worked for us.
Interesting.
So in terms, yeah.
So I think the research part, I think you wanted to talk about, right? Please go.
So in terms of research internally, now we have a pretty big research team. We have a 3 to 4 member research team who are kind of tagged to different products and different geographies, of course, because of the scale that we are looking at and the revenue numbers that we are looking at. Uh, there are some tools that we are currently using, and that where we've really seen success. Uh, I mean, in terms of geography, Lucia is one tool that really helped us build a lot of contacts and build account names in and around Asia. There's another tool called Slintel, which works for APAC and Middle East and Asia. Zoom Info, of course, all of us have heard of, is pretty famous, and the data is pretty strong for the US. And another successful tool that has really worked for us is Apollo.io for Europe as a geography. Since most of our targeting is global, we have to use multiple tools or different platforms to bring in or build lists for different geographies. Another important thing is, so in terms of account building or account identification, we do 2 things, right? One is build a list of accounts. Another one is build a list of contacts or personas you want to target in these accounts. So this is where our product experts and salespeople really came into the picture, because they exactly were able to tell us who were these people they were talking to in our existing, in our existing customer base, and our prospect pitches that they made. What were the what kind of job titles they were talking to, what kind of seniority these people belong, like were they CXOs or management people or product managers. So they were really able to help us with the kind exact personas that we have to be targeting for our campaign. So customer success, since you said it was different, one is because customer success people are people who do the delivery for us, right? They talk to our existing customers day in and day out. So they know who are the users, end users, who are the teams who are involved in the buying cycle, and during the course of discussion, who are the kind of titles who will be involved. So we really, bringing these people together in the ABM pod was very helpful in the beginning itself to kind of draw out the ICP better in a better way.
Mhm. So talking about the ICP, so was it like framed before ABM and then, or was it like as you started doing the research and taking some of these inputs from product and everybody else, right? Did you evolve ICP, or you already had a solid ICP that you went after?
Uh, Initially, of course, we had a very rough uh, ICP because outbound had its own ICP, and then the marketing team had their own definition of target audience, right? I think we really had an evolved version of it when we started ABM. We kind of went into the details of what is the revenue size, employee size of the company that we're going to be targeting. Is it going to be a growth company? Are we looking at companies in US? Is it West Coast or East Coast? And then, for example, one important factor for us is the traffic to the website, right? So all of this is like we went to the granular details of all these parameters to draw out our ICP only when we started doing ABM as a strategy.
Yeah, yeah. I think you touched upon signals, right? This is not a question that I had before, but like based on what you said, right? So when we talk about ABM, intent as a synonym sort of comes right these days, but back then it wasn't. But like, were you like trying to within the target accounts, right? So were you also looking for any active signals to either tier them higher or any of that sort?
Yes, yeah. We had, of course, we tried and kind of got information from all these intent-based platforms. Like we all know, Bambora is a very famous one. So we had, and of course, we looked at something which was basically free initially, right? We started with Google Alerts, and we started with information which is related to companies which got recently funded and new hires, and these kind of open information on the internet. And then we went back to the intent data, which is basically first party or second party from these platforms.
Okay. So how effective was it? Like which of that, like the ones that you sourced through, let's say Google Alert and others, you found it useful, or the intent providers, like the dedicated providers, right? So which one was it more effective? And can you start an ABM without building your intent?
I definitely think these platforms give us a lot of information, but that is only at scale, right? Like, when you have a huge base, then you can come. They can help you come up with a shortlisted list, which can be kind of filtered based on the intent data that the platform gives. But to get started, honestly, when we got started, we really were scared because we had to. If you have to invest in all these tools, you need to have a huge budget, right? Which we did not have when we got started. So as simple as kind of setting up Google alerts for the kind of keywords that we were researching, for example, personalization, and if there were any companies which was listed under news for all these key trigger names, I mean trigger keywords, we kind of use that information. I think to get started, there's enough information on the internet. Like there are a lot of sites like Owler and all sends you weekly updates. I mean, Owler is one such for retail for us. So there will be a lot of newsletters and a lot of these platforms which gives you time to time information on companies, right? Like Pipe Candy also, like for example, Chennai-based startup gives us a lot of information on their blogs and articles about e-commerce companies. So our research person's job was to follow up on all this and come up with the go-to companies and keep adding to our existing account list.
Interesting. So I think we touched upon the alignments, right, across different functions, right? So I wanted to ask, how did the sales marketing alignment happen? Was it natural, or was it like one function going and sort of influencing others? And you also talked about customer success. Maybe that was natural because they were the ones who were sort of talking to the customer, and they were sitting on a pile of information that you wanted to tap in. But typically in any organization, right, sales marketing alignment is a big friction point, right? So how did you sort of solve it, and how active were their involvement, like when you were maybe the beginning of your initiative, right? So they were there, but like was there a sustained contribution from sales, for example?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, initially before we started ABM, we all worked in silos, though we all like caught up once in a quarter or once in a month whenever needed for group meetings. We did. But when it came to ABM, I mean, actually speaking, it was initiated from marketing because it was on us to bring in more conversions, because sales team kept complaining that, there were a lot of, so the issue that we faced was the marketing team constantly kept telling that, we kept generating a lot of leads and that did not really convert down the funnel, whatever happened in the sales team, right? But then the sales team kept coming back to us telling the quality of leads were poor, right?
Hmm.
This is when we kind of got together to strategize and figure out that something is going wrong, right? This is what happened pre ABM, like before we even started to kind of strategize, right? But after the ABM strategy kind of picked up, which is when the marketing team went and pitched this to the different teams and we brought them together. Now, what we do, since we've been practicing ABM campaigns or ABM as a strategy for quite some time, from I mean the strategy part, like every quarter when we kind of discuss quarterly goals or even annual goals every year, we sit together. We have stakeholders from key teams who will participate in this to look at the previous year's metrics or quarters metrics, including the kind of for example, there might have been a lot of customers we closed and they might not be bringing a lot of revenue to us, right? Like, which means these accounts are something that we should not be targeted going forward, right? This is where customer success comes to place, or delivery teams or product or tech teams can help us understand this better, because your ICP cannot be completely defined and perfectly defined always. It needs to be evolving as the company grows, and because the industry also keeps changing, right? So this was something that really helped us tweak our strategy now and then. So now the sales and marketing alignment is absolutely fine, because one important thing that we have now is we have co-owned metrics like and KPIs. Like, for example, the demand gen and the marketing team kind of owns pipeline value and revenue number as well, along with the sales team, right? Initially, the case was like the marketing or the demand gen team, all they had to do was kind of own the form fills and website signups or MQLs, right? But which is not the case now. So this is a change that really impacted the entire team and the way we kind of look at the work that we do, right? The quality of work that we do. We, in fact, came to a stage where we incentivize teams for pipeline and revenue more than the vanity metrics like MQLs or website signups.
Awesome, fantastic.
And coming
So,
to the question that you asked, like how often we come together, we now have weekly stand-up meetings. We have bi-weekly meetings where we talk about progress, regress about these campaigns. So we have tighter groups where we have 4 or 5 people working for different pods. So, for example, every time we do a GTM campaign or a GTM meeting, we have an ABM approach for that particular GTM to be rolled out, right? GTM strategy to be rolled out. So there, the team will be very tight. We have one marketer, one product person, one outbound person, and one sales person, and it's pretty quick and it's very close and very tight now. So this is how it functions now. And one important thing is the reporting part, right? I can't really stress enough about this, to have your reports and common CRMs in place so that there is enough tracking and reports available for us to understand where the leads are leaking and what is really happening to them.
mm-hmm. So what is a typical conversation in those meetings, right? I'm assuming it's no longer like I did my job, you did not do, I did my job, you did not do, right? Like before, right? So what is the typical conversation post your ABM, and especially after maturing and doing it for quite some time now, with especially with sales team?
Yeah,
Do you
definitely.
guys still fight or not?
No, I mean, of course we do. I think that's a never-ending one, but not a very hard disagreement which we used to have initially. But now it is very organic and it is very, it's a win-win for both of us, because the conversations that we have is to really understand. We have group gong listening calls, right? Like we sit and listen to calls together to figure out what really happened to an account. We talk about, for example, the sales people, right? The sales heads or VPs even come back with a list of top accounts they really read up somewhere, and they'll be like, can you add this to your ABM list, right? This has become really organic, and it's become seamless now that uh, people understand the value that ABM as a strategy has started to add, right? Otherwise, it will be the outbound person like separately reaching out to people that they know or they want to reach out to, right? And the marketing team will continuously keep putting dollars in on Google search or display, right? Now it has become very closely knitted that information from one team goes to the other, and it is very seamless, and it is really helpful. We're able to see that it it benefits all of us, because end of the day we all are responsible to deliver a particular pipeline value.
Fantastic. So talking about content for ABM, right? So how has it changed, and then what kind of content has it worked? What has not worked, and how do you like? Do you have any specific content strategy for ABM and maybe even for other campaigns? And how do you sort of repurpose your content and all of that? Because that is one of the like unless you have like
Absolutely.
tens of people sitting and producing it, right? So typically this is one of the problems, right? So where I don't have enough content, who can help me? So can you talk about a little bit on how you approached?
To be honest, when we started ABM or even now, the first thing that we look at when we come up with a strategy is how much of existing content do we have? Like we have a product marketing team, and the content team has put together a matrix of existing content pieces and different types, different formats of these content, right? All we did is how do we repurpose this, right? Like, for example, say we had a case study, how do we kind of ungate this and maybe come up with a blog version of it? This is how we started. When we started, we kind of came up with content pieces, because of course we definitely could not afford to go back and ask our content team to write, and I mean to kind of help us build like 10 to 15 content materials, right? So that is one important thing what all of us need to do when you start a ABM strategy is go back and look at what are the kind of content pieces you have and how can all of this be repurposed. Like for example, we were sitting on a lot of these webinar contents, right? Like we went back and repurposed them into shorter video snippets, and we reused all of them in our campaigns as touch points. So all of this is like, because we know in terms of campaigns, I mean, if you're using it on ads or emails, people are not going to be ready to look at, a 10 pager, or they're not going to be ready to look at a huge 30-minute or a 40-minute video, right? Like, so how do we like kind of shorten this is something that you need to really look at, because the engagement, account level engagement or person level engagement is very important when you do an ABM strategy, right? So you have to think when you look at the content material, all you have to look at is how engaging is this going to be for the user. And something that's very important in terms of ABM is customizing this content for the ICP or the target list that you have, right? This is not this we do even on search, right? Like for example, I bid for a personalization keyword. My landing page definitely needs to have content regarding personalization, right? So it's the same way. Instead of keyword, here it is going to be personas, which is people or people who fall into a particular job title or a designation, right? You have people from product marketing teams. Talk to them in a language that they will understand, and talk to them about the pain points that that particular team really faces. So this is something that we really understood, that, for example, the language that we use for a product marketer, I mean, product manager, does not really work for a CXO, right? Because the CXO is not going to be worried about the easy integration, right? He's going to be worried about revenue and efficiency increase, right? So the language and the way you talk to different personas is going to be different. This is something that we're already doing. It's not something that's new. All you have to do is just your language will be tweaked, and the content should be personalized for the persona instead of keywords and landing pages. That's it. And one
Interesting.
more important thing for ABM is we all know, right? Like we have different stages or cohorts when you do an ABM campaign. We have a set of, so starting at the funnel will be reach, and then you have the awareness segment, then you have accounts who are going to be engaging with you, and then you have the consideration cohort, right? So in the 4 stages, what we really need to look at is your content type should be really different. Like for example, somebody who's already heard about vue.ai and know of a product, or somebody who's really looking at competitors in the market, really know what the pain point is, right? So for that person, your content needs to be completely different. when you start your campaign, you should probably start with a brand campaign or industry-based content pieces. So all of this is something that has worked for us. The starting,
Mm.
so typically our campaign, I would say, had like 7 to 8 touch points, like the nurture cycle, right? So we started with brand ads and industry-based content, and then we of course used even blogs. One mistake we initially did was to gate our uh, case studies and white papers, right? So we later realized that we already have their contact IDs and we know who these people are. So which means all you want to do is ensure that these people land on your page and consume your information, right?
Mm.
So we then went ahead and ungated these reports and ensured that the engagement on the page was tracked. So the metric that you really track in the first few stages of your cohort or your funnel is the engagement on your page and engagement from these accounts. How
Mm.
much time are they spending on your page and how many times are they visiting your website? Because they're not going to, they're all like, I mean, at least for us, we were looking at really larger accounts and larger deal sizes, right? So it's not like they're going to come in and then sign up on your website like your search campaign. They're going to come
Right.
in multiple times, consume a lot of information, and then convert through any channel. It could be
Mm.
a LinkedIn outreach message or a cold call or even a website sign up, right? So
Mm.
we,
Mm.
this is very important to, because initial days, even when we started campaigns, right, like when we started our ABM campaigns, we were really struggling to understand how do we really show ROI for these campaigns, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, a lot of these marketers were confused that, we're not getting leads, we're not getting inbound signups. That's not the case. You are not going to see inbound signups in the first 1 week or 10 days, right? Like even for your search, it's not going to happen when you launch a campaign immediately. So it is going to take time. The only important thing I would really suggest, or important suggestion from my side for ABM would be with respect to content is trial and error. You have to keep trying, you have to keep tweaking, you have to keep editing, because it's not the same. And especially with COVID, right? Like we had to go back and tweak most of our content pieces to ensure it fits into the COVID angle, because a lot of our product use cases changed because of COVID.
Mm. Mm.
So
Mm. Mm.
seasonality is something that you can look at, and it really worked for us, right? Like but that's going to be a very time sensitive content piece. You cannot use it like forever, but it can work for you probably 3 or 4 months.
Mm.
Whenever there is that season, you can go ahead. Like for example,
Mm.
during Christmas, we come up with this holiday theme campaign, right? So all of this
Mm.
is very
Mm.
seasonal and very time sensitive.
Mm.
And we realize that, which means if it's Christmas, I plan my ABM campaigns 2 to 3 months in advance,
Mm. Mm. Sure.
right? That is how we kind of ensured content fell in place.
Awesome. I think you briefly touched upon attribution. I think it's a topic of its own. So maybe someday we can also do this, right? So a couple of questions before we stop and then try and answer our audience's question, right? So I think this is a question that you wanted to cover. So let me take that first, right? So the customer marketing, right? So ABM for customer marketing. It's not something that is widely spoken of, right? Typically, people tend to think that this is only a demand gen or a pipeline acceleration, but I think this can be, I would think, more effectively used for customer marketing because you already landed and you have something to showcase to the rest of the, let's say, department or functions or whatever. And then, right, I mean, the whole notion of personalization can actually be uh, accelerated when you do ABM for customer marketing. So I think you touched upon this initially, right, where customer marketing was also one of the type of ABM that you wanted to do. So can you just talk about it, because it's quite interesting. Hmm.
Absolutely. Like I said, ABM is, of course, it can be used for multiple parts, right? One is acquiring new leads or creating new demand. The other one is pipeline acceleration, right? Like how fast or quicker can you push one account down to closure, from an opportunity to a closure stage. The third part is about what do you do? You're sitting on a huge list of customers list, right? Like you can go and upsell and cross sell to them. So there are different touch points apart from your customer success or your delivery person in person talking to these people. There are going to be a lot of other titles or a lot of other people on the company who are on the internet, who are very actively seeking and consuming information, right? So we kind of, what we thought was, we were already sitting on so many email IDs, right? Because they're already our customers. We had so many contact IDs, email IDs for all these people. What we started doing is, initially we used to send only the newsletters to them, right? Which is a part of our account level engagement that we do for our existing customers. What we did is, even now, even as of now, we have an ongoing campaign for all our warm and hot leads, which is basically for pipeline acceleration. And then we have one campaign which is to acquire new leads. And then the third campaign is for our existing customers to nurture them, to keep telling them that, for example, we have all these credibility based content, right? Like we have customer testimonials running to them. And of course, when they see a lot of customer testimonials, when we request them for a testimonial, it is very credible, right? Because they're seeing a lot of competitors in the market talking to us and talking about our product, right? So all of this we did. And like, for example, if you get ranked on Gartner, or we get a review, or say, for example, we got an award, all of this went into our ABM campaigns as touch points through multiple channels, be it LinkedIn, any ABM tool, or email or record app, whatever it is, right? It went in across different channels, and we were able to see a lot of engagement through these channels, and it really kind of overlapped with the kind of engagement these accounts had with our customer success or customer marketing team.
Interesting. Yeah.
Definitely helps. I would say this is not going to really help you cut down on your churn. Of course, if your product is not going to be delivering properly, of course, there's going to be churn. But this definitely helps you to kind of keep them like engaged and nurturing. You keep nurturing them throughout the journey.
So what was the goal? To retain them or upsell, cross sell? What kind of goals did you have for these set of customers?
Of course, I mean, like when we do campaigns, we have goals. I mean, like we segment them into accounts or companies which are at a risk, right? Like churn risk. And then we have companies which we just want to be like stationary or static, and we just want to keep continuing with our existing services. And then the third set is where we want to upsell and cross sell. This is where we already have a lot of product content, right? So all we had to do was just to use, like, for example, I sell them product A. I mean, if they've already become a customer for one product, I had to run ads or distribute content about product B and product C to them, which is already there. So like I don't think people should be scared that you have multiple campaigns, then you have to come up with so much content and so much efforts are needed. Definitely not, because we are already having all of this, right? Like how do we repurpose and reuse this for different segments and different target audiences is how we need to really think about it.
Awesome. I think for somebody who's sort of listened for the last 40 minutes or so, right? So I think it's like you sort of went through like a flawless execution, right? But I'm sure there's a lot of learnings, a lot of mistakes. Is not something that like we've overly covered, right? It's all about, right? I think all these things, right? It makes perfect sense when you look back, but especially in your case when there were no opportunities for peer learning and things like that, I'm sure there were a lot of learnings, right? And mistakes that you had to go through. So if you could talk about it in the context of when you so two questions, right? So related to that. So one, you did this for, you started with Vue and you sort of scaled it for Block, right? When doing the second time, was it any easier because you had an established playbook, right? And the other thing is, when you, let's say, assuming you start today and not 3 years ago, how's your, like, based on whatever resources that are available, people to talk to, the sessions like this, right? So how would you think it would be different?
Uh, First thing about us kind of, scaling this for another brand, fairly, yes, I would say it was a little bit easy when compared to the previous time, because this time we knew what we were getting into, we knew what has worked for us and what did not. And the most important part was this time our sales and the marketing team was together, right? Like we had lesser convincing to do between teams, right? Like we already, since we have shown and seen results, the people involved in the teams were really convinced that okay, this is going to be of some value to me in some way or the other, so let me put whatever efforts I have to put in, right? And one big mistake or something, or a lesson that we took back from the previous experiments that we did was the kind of KPIs and the tracking that we did, right? Like this time we drew out a much more granular or a detailed plan, uh, as to how do we, if something breaks, what is plan B, plan C, plan D, right? This is something that we did this time. But one issue, or one slightly different point of view, is that for us, Vue and Blox are completely different brands, right? Like vue.ai was a well-established brand by itself when we started our ABM strategy back then. Whereas Blox is a new brand, and keeping this in mind, we spent a lot of time and campaigns in creating brand awareness for the brand initially. So this is something which we had to kind of look at it differently, because you know a brand versus an unknown brand, how people react, right? And second thing is the industries that we targeted were different. So the target geos were different. So in terms of account identification and like for example, we targeted India and APAC, right? So we saw a lot of engagement for one brand versus another, right? The costs were the CPCs were a lot more lesser, but in terms of conversion, it didn't really move down the funnel faster, right? Like, so we were able to see a lot of differences because of the segments that we were targeting.
Cool. Yeah, I think I like have more questions. I just realized I don't think 1 hour is enough to talk about ABM, right? So I think we'll see if it need to be increased next time around. But let's just start with some questions. So I have some difficulty reading through the questions. So if you're able to access it, right? So if you can sort of pick and then answer. If you can also read it. So
Yes. So Suresh says, can you expand on the intent data? What are the signals that you usually take into consideration while building the intent data? I think we've already addressed this, right? So we have different types of intent data that we can consider. The first thing is what happens on your own website. You have a lot of tools to kind of give you enough information on your first party data, right? Which is Clearbit, and then you have Lead Feeder. A lot of these plugins can be kind of course, all of these are paid platforms. You can make use of what happens on your own website. Like a lot of these websites, I mean, a lot of these times you don't know who are these anonymous accounts who are really engaging on your website but not really signing up, right? And then the second party or third party intent data, you have different platforms, like I said, Bambora, and even like Rollworks and Recordable. All these ABM platforms as well gives you a lot of these intent information regarding your list etc. Like for example, you give them a list of accounts, they can help you identify uh, and you say, for example, put a filter on the list of keywords or the list of topics that these people are showing interest on. This is the intent match is something that they do, and they'll give you a filtered list of accounts that you can consider for your strategy. uh, what are the prerequisites that need to be done before we start an ABM campaign for a services company? Like content to position ourselves as industry leaders, a CRM system, buyer intent tools, etc. Oh, this is
from
interesting.
whom?
Uh,
This is from whom?
this is from Abhilash Anand.
Abhilash. Okay.
Yes. Do you want to like add, because services company, I mean, maybe the only difference is of course the kind of target segment that you're looking at, right? And the content materials are definitely going to be different, because I mean, the type of content will definitely be the same. The content material may be different because you're talking about, when you talk about a product versus a service, might be a different ball game altogether. But end of the day, in terms of ABM implementation, you are definitely going to be targeting set of people, right? Say for in a product company, maybe I'm targeting a different ICP, versus a services company, you will be targeting a different ICP. That will be the major difference. But otherwise, looking at it as a strategy, it will be almost similar as my point of view. Is LinkedIn only platform for generating inbound leads or mailers work? You have a lot of I mean, if you're talking about spray and pray campaigns, of course Google search is one, and then emails definitely work. But very important part about email is having how relevant these contacts or email IDs are for your product, right? You can't like simply bombard them with unwanted information. So really need to kind of work on your email list and personas that you have identified for the particular campaign. Emails definitely work, but emails are not like a very short term or an immediate one. Be it email or ABM, all of this is going to be a long term one. But of course, it's going to help you bring in larger deal sizes or deals. I mean, accounts which are enterprise and mid market types.
It's all about slotting, right? And in a way where whether you're using email as a pre-targeting mechanism or you've created awareness and you want to be strategically engaging with them.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Do you try top down approach, or does mid to top approach work? Do you try convincing the management first, or you get user to convince the management? Uh, I mean, like ours is a very
Who is it
flat.
from?
This is from Kranti.
Kranti. Hey, Kranti.
Yeah.
Hmm.
For us, it was fairly. I mean, for me, of course, not at MSC, it was fairly an advantage to have a CEO head the marketing team herself, right? So that is a very big advantage for us, because the buy-in was pretty faster and easier, since she was able to understand the importance of sales and marketing alignment and how useful this is going to be. So it depends on how your company and your team is structured, I would say, if you really need to do a top-down or a bottom-down approach. Because if you think that it's very hierarchical and you have to really get a buy-in first from your management before convincing the others, then it is. Because if you don't get budgets and if you don't get the management sign off on certain things, the teams are, even if the teams agree, you will not be able to kind of establish this as a strategy, right? So it completely depends on the company that you work for. How are you able to track engagements from a targeted contact list? So this is any platform that we use, right? Like whether it's Recotap or whether it's an email, uh, whether it's HubSpot or any other email channel that we use, you can easily track engagement at a contact level and at an account level. These platforms give you engagement data. They give you data in terms of lead scoring. So they score these accounts and contact IDs based on the engagement on your website. So you can get a download of it from the platform by itself.
That
So
question is from
this was from Darshan.
Darshan.
So the only thing is, when you use multiple channels, you will have to ensure that it sits on your CRM, and you kind of collate all of this together and ensure that you really make use of the engagement data. What is the frequency of each touch point? We generally had a 14 to 15 days for each touch point, because the kind, mostly we were targeting US and Europe, so we gave it enough time for the content to reach them. Yes. Do you use ABM for retention? If yes, how? What do you communicate for retention? I think we already spoke about the customer success part, right? For retention, the kind of content that we use is customer testimonials, of course, from bigger brands and all these top brands that we have. And then we talk about a lot of these awards and recognitions that the company has got, right? This is another credibility based source for our existing customers. And then we, of course, talk about for upselling and cross-selling, we talk about multiple other products and use cases for these products. How much time or weeks or months did it take for you to see the results, conversions coming in once you adopted? Okay. This ROI part is very important, like I said, right? So I personally feel that you need to give it at least 3 months to start seeing results, because you are trying to nurture these accounts, right? Like 1 quarter, 1.5 quarters is definitely important. And as you continue the efforts, keep continuing your campaigns, you will be able to see better results, because say you're nurturing the same set of accounts and these people for more than 6 months and 7 months, right? Versus 1 or 2 months. So I think you need to give it at least 3 months time, but you will definitely be able to get cues from your click-through rates and engagement rates for your own content that you're using, for you to see if your content pieces are working. You have metrics on your GA or all these platforms that will help you find out if you're going the right way. But in terms of ROI, you definitely need to give it time, 3 to 5 months at least. Thank you for putting up with the extra time to help us. Oh, okay, Rashmika and Arun. Okay, they're just thanking us. Platforms that we can use for research purpose regarding accounts. So, say LinkedIn Sales Navigator is something that all of us can use. That's pretty useful. That has been there for a long time. Apart from that, I can probably type out those tools that has really worked for us, so that I don't repeat this. I hope you can see, right? Apart from that, in terms of account building, I think anything on the internet, right? Like looking at recent funding information, looking at recent hires, like CXO level hires for these companies. Uh, this is again time sensitive, like going and congratulating them and writing to them has really worked for us. Adding these accounts on a time to time basis is something that you can do. There's a lot
I think
of
the alert idea is pretty cool, right? I think no investment, but I think you sort of like organically get this intent, and very hyper reliable, right?
Yes, absolutely. And like you said, apart from Google Alerts, you can sign up to a lot of these newsletters. Different industries have their own newsletters. Signing up to them, you will be informed about any of these companies or target accounts you have, which is on news, right? So you know, maybe you should. Sometimes you can actually, you'll find that a lot of companies are shutting shop, right? Like, which means you have to remove them from your existing target list. So this, in this way also, it kind of will come handy both ways, like to kind of target newer accounts, and even from removing or kind of removing junk from your existing list. Okay, how landing pages plays an important role in ABM campaigns. You said we need to create separate content for CXOs, product managers, since language to them is different. How you approach it in creating the mockups of the pages to development. So yeah, in terms of content, we use landing pages probably in the third or fourth touch point. I mean, fourth touch point or upwards. Mostly, it has been very. The first few touch points have been very generic and very content specific, like blogs or articles or something like that. In terms of landing pages for CXOs, the messaging should definitely be different. It should be more ROI, more revenue driven, more KPI driven. For product managers, of course, it should be KPI driven, but the KPIs that they target, for example, it can be as granular as so many hours can be saved, or so many man hours can be saved. For us, for our product, it was like that. But one important thing is to keep your landing page a bit short instead of having like a 6 or a 7 page scroll, seven scrolls of length. Have it a bit short and ensure that it renders on mobile and desktop properly. This is very important because a lot of us tend to animate most of our pages and it doesn't really render in the right way. Ensure it kind of loads properly. Apart from that, if you look at any B2B template and B2B website landing page templates, I think that should work. In the initial stages, we used most of our existing product pages, right? And once we launched our campaigns, we sat and looked at user recordings and then we tweaked our pages. I think that's the best way to go about, because not every company has the same thing that works for us, works for each other, right? So probably look at your existing engagement data to tweak your landing pages. Does testimonial ads work for land and expand accounts as well? Absolutely. Testimonial ads work for all different types of segments that I spoke about: your existing customers, your pipeline acceleration list, and also your the leads that you're trying to acquire for the first time, right? But only at the stage when they are aware of your product and in a different cohort. Like, you can't immediately start with a customer testimonial and expect them to engage with you, right? Like, use it when they're ready to consume your your testimonial, or ready to understand what the customer is speaking. So video, and we kind of used even static testimonial ads, because not a lot of platforms will let you run videos, right? So have a video version as well as a static display banner version of the same testimonial. Just ensure it is shorter so that people can read it. The question: top down, bottom product you sell. When you sell, do you sell to top to users? Okay, sorry. Mostly for these larger accounts, it is always top down for us. I mean, internally, at least at MSD, since the deal sizes are larger, we go through this way. But for smaller accounts, of course, we look at SMB market as well, but very limited. For them, we start with a not bottom, I would say mid management type of people. What are the first 6 touch points for you type of content? Okay, the first few touch points that we've used are like the brand ads. We've used open blogs, which talks about the industry that we're targeting. If it's a fashion retailer, we talk about what is really new in fashion retailers. Of course, tying it back to the product that we have, not an irrelevant one. And then talk about the pain points that these people or ICPs are targeting. Like, for example, if you're targeting a product marketer, product manager or product marketer, talk about what pain point they have, which your product is trying to solve for, right? First, talk about the pain point in one touch point, and then talk about how your product can solve for this pain point in the next touch point. And then, of course, we used product videos or product-based copies in the 5th or 6th touch points. This is how it has been. Okay, Bhunesh says thank you. I think that's all.
Awesome. I think we're
4 o'clock,
right on time. Folks, thank you so much for sticking around, and thank you so much, Rashmika. And I think I love this conversation, right? like I said, if only we had time, I think we had more questions. So hopefully we'll do many of this in coming months. And yeah, so if you guys enjoyed, just give us a thumbs up. This is like I'm doing a YouTube, right? Yeah,
Thank
so I
you.
think, yeah, thank you so much. So like I said, so we will share this recording, right? And then join us next time. So thank you so much for taking time. Thanks, folks. Bye. Thanks, Rashmika.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.